makes me feel like a man.
You want every team to lose any other game? Sorry. Bailey Zappi just put another dime. You know what? Whoa, time out. Are you kidding? That's what I'm gonna try to drop a mic. Welcome to the Warner Brothas Podcast. My name is Keenan, joined by my brother Kyle. The day after the 2 Game 7s that went exact opposite of what I thought they were going to, but they were wildly entertaining, of course, as Game 7s are. Kyle, your thoughts, your initial thoughts, and how you doing today?
I'm great. I've been looking forward to this podcast, obviously, since the games ended yesterday.
Yeah.
NBA playoffs, man. It's been a weird postseason because I feel like it's been just as entertaining as usual, but I feel like we've gotten less close games like we did last night. I feel like we've gotten a lot of blowouts just across the board. And a lot less drama, honestly. A lot less drama across the board, just across all series. So, yesterday was refreshing, especially after, as we'll talk about the Knicks-Pacers game. That wasn't too interesting all the way through. I mean, it was entertaining, but wasn't really a close game. So the second Game 7 was refreshing. But I'm great. Cannot wait for the conference finals that start tomorrow. We're getting basketball every single night the rest of the way until the finals. So, I do hope in a way that both of these series are long series. So
yeah, hopefully.
How you doing? How you doing?
I'm good. I am good. These series are for the most part, exactly what I was hoping for. I know, obviously, the Knicks-Pacers Game 7 I do wish was closer, but as you said, still very entertaining. The Knicks did pull it within 6 midway through the third, but then the Pacers, the depth really showed. Did you want to start with that game, or did you want to go kind of work backwards?
I think we got to start with Nuggets Timberwolves.
Just making sure. I feel the same. I just wanted to make sure. So the Nuggets get out and they blitzed the Timberwolves, which you kind of expected a little bit coming off of a huge loss. I understand it's a Game 7, so that loss kind of goes out the window. But the sense of urgency was absolutely there from the Nuggets early on. You had Jokic, who was a man amongst boys on the glass. I think he had 15 boards in the first half. Jamal Murray going off, especially in the second quarter. He was showing why he's known as the clutch closer on that. One of the clutch closers. I know Jokic can close too, of course, but he was putting on a display. Ant was doing nothing. But it never, I don't know if it felt like this for you, but it never felt like the Timberwolves were 100% out of it. It felt like they were keeping it to like 12 to 18 instead of letting it balloon to like 24 and up, kind of like the Pacers did to the Knicks. Like the Pacers exploded and got out to that 24 point, and then obviously with the injuries with the Knicks, we'll talk about that way more in depth later. But the Timberwolves stayed close enough to where you're like, if they can string together 4 stops, they could make it interesting. Did I think they were going to come back and win? Absolutely not. But that is why you play all 48 minutes. That's why you play the games. And that was a complete team win from the Timberwolves. Before we break it down more, what were your initial thoughts on that game?
To answer your question, whether I felt they were out of it, after that first half, I think, it was 15 at the half.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the largest comeback ever in Game 7 history, which shows you how tightly contested or just, it's either tightly contested or blowout at a Game 7, it seems like.
It was 11 by the 75 Warriors and the 2018 Warriors. So a very old team and then one of the greatest teams ever assembled. It took to just get a double-digit comeback. Game 7s are just different than anything else, but go on.
So, going into the second half, I felt like the Nuggets were in complete control. You know what I mean? I didn't necessarily think it was going to get to 30. I didn't feel that, but on both ends of the floor, they were in control of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jokic obviously was controlling the game. You know what I mean? Because Murray had an explosive first half. So Jokic was kind of, I want to say second fiddle, but he was facilitating. He was a monster on the boards.
He was the glue guy in the first half. Just doing the
He was
little
the glue.
things, scoring when needed, passing when needed, and just let Murray cook.
It was the glue, and then they come out the second half, and T-Wolves clamped up. They just went to another level defensively, and before you knew it, it was like a 6-point game, an 8-point game, and that was the weird part about it is they were coming back, and it didn't really feel like they were coming back. It felt like they were cutting the lead, but before you knew it, the lead was just cut. It was already a 4-point game. I think 6 minutes in, maybe 4 or 5 minutes in the third quarter. And then it was off from there, and you could feel the energy shift like completely in the building. That's what was weird to me. And I think you see this with home crowds, like especially like Philly. I'll just call on them. Like anytime Philly, like last year in Game 5 against the Celtics, Tatum's having a horrible game. Harden's having a great game, it seems like. And then before you knew it, I think Tatum hits 2 threes or something like that, and you could just feel the energy shift. And like Philly's one place where they definitely feed off the crowd. Like,
oh yeah,
if the crowd's off, like, and I was surprised how much Denver felt like a Philadelphia crowd last night. Like once that lead got to 4, you could feel this. The fans got tight, and Denver certainly did not get tight, but you could just feel the energy completely shift in the building. One of the weirder games. It was almost a microcosm of the series. Because the first half, you got Denver's explosive offense. Second half, you got the Timberwolves' lockdown defense. So it was an incredible game for me. I have much more thoughts, but what else was your takeaways? What are you going to remember from this game?
So
answer that for me.
What I'm going to remember the Nuggets role players doing nothing. Like I'm gonna remember the Nuggets role players doing nothing and Karl Anthony Towns. To be honest with you, Anthony Edwards played well towards the second half and late, but they're not in that position at all if Karl Anthony Towns doesn't have the first half that he does. Like Jaden McDaniels was a constant; he played well throughout the entirety of the game, but Karl Anthony Towns played well throughout the entirety of the game too. But like. He had 13, I want to say, in the first half and was making all the shots to make it so it didn't blow up to 20. It didn't blow up to 22. He was stopping the runs, getting in the post. He hit a big 3 on the left wing to kind of start to slow things down. And so Karl Anthony Towns, I think, played probably his best game of the playoffs, honestly. He was aggressive. He made it tough as you can on Jokic. Obviously, Jokic still ended with 34, 19, and 7. That just shows his greatness. But like he made it as tough as you can on Jokic. Jokic shot under 50%. We don't see that too often. Obviously, Gobert did that too, but a lot of it was Towns. So Towns is what I'll remember from this game because he definitely kept them alive and obviously had the big dunk at the end that really just was the icing on the cake. And then for Denver, it was really just a 2-man show. And they Denver scored 98 points. Jokic and Murray had 79. They had 10 assists, 22 rebounds. The Denver cast outside of Murray and Jokic, 8 of 28 from the floor, 2 of 11 from 3. So they scored a whole 19
21 points.
Or 21, yeah. But yeah, they didn't do anything. So, and I mean, Porter didn't shoot well the whole entire series. He averaged 10 on 32% from 3, and in the Lakers series, it felt like he didn't miss a shot. Murray, honestly, for the series wasn't great. He had a great Game 7, or a great even first half of Game 7. The second half, he kind of started to fade a little bit. That's kudos to Anthony Edwards. He locked him up, or was locking him up. Team defense, too, of course. But Murray played good throughout points of the series, but he wasn't great. He wasn't what the Murray we saw last year in the playoffs. Jokic was a constant. He obviously had his ups and downs a little bit. He shot bad from 3 throughout the playoffs, but otherwise he looked like the MVP, what you expected him to look like. But those are my takeaways, what I'll remember from the series a little bit more, but definitely from Game 7.
Yeah, I mean, Murray did not have a great playoff run in general. He didn't shoot well. His stats are still in line with what his career playoff stats are. Maybe even more in line with his regular season stats because his scoring takes quite a jump. So I think his scoring was around his career.
I think it was his regular
average.
Season stats. Like he was 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists in this series. And I think 18, 19 is around roughly what his regular season is.
Right. And if I remember correctly, he was big in the closeout game versus LA. And then he obviously had that game winner in, I think, game 2 against LA.
Yep, both of those games.
Can't remember exactly the game. So, and
yeah,
then he showed up in the
game
game
5.
7. So, and he showed up in the game 7. So he really showed up when it matters. Jokic, obviously, as we know, showed up. Well, I'm going to remember. It's funny you say Towns because he is part of what I'm going to remember on the T-Wolves side of things. It's going to be him. I had it in my notes. I had Towns / Gobert / Naz Reid legacy game. I mean, I thought those were the 3 keys to victory for them. I couldn't. You had that. You had that Rudy Gobert turnaround jump shot at the end of the shot clock. Towns just consistent all the way through. He still picked up a dumb foul late. Got to 5 fouls, and they actually were going to ride it out with Naz and Gobert, it looked like, because I think Gobert fouled out with about 2 minutes left, and then they put Towns in with Reed.
Yeah. I think they should go to that lineup a little more. I like the Towns Naz. They got a little bit more versatility on the outside, and all 5 of them can shoot if you get that lineup. I think they could get lively away from the basketball. We'll get to the next series thoughts here soon, but we'll worry about this one right now.
Yeah, and I just couldn't believe how, I mean, you look at the stat line, it's not really explosive for Towns. He ended up with 23 points. You mentioned Jaden McDaniels. He somehow ended up with 23. And if you would have told me it was 6 points last night, I would have believed it. Like, that's the quietest 23 I've ever seen.
He just made a couple threes here and there where, like, he played really good defense, but obviously the team did. But he just made a couple threes, like the calm down 3 here, a calm down 3 there. So, but yeah, I was shocked when I saw 23. I thought it was like 12. That was like 3 of 6 from 3, right. And then he scored 12. But it was 23, and I was like, okay, great.
Yeah, so I'm really going to remember, just how constant Towns was. Like, he actually showed some dog to him. He did a great job on Jokic. Yeah. I know Jokic was wearing down because he played 47 minutes, but he still did a great job of challenging Jokic, especially in the fourth quarter, minus the dumb fouls. So between Naz making big shots in the fourth quarter, he had a big 3, he had a big shot going to the rim, had a big block on Jokic. Gobert, again, he had a turnaround, he had a big offensive rebound late. Like, all 3 of them made big plays when Ant wasn't playing that well, honestly. He didn't really make his presence felt until he started guarding Murray. And that's what great players are supposed to do. You know, I know a lot of fans will point to, you know, shooting numbers and stuff like that with, like we talked about last time, like Tatum's not shooting that well from 3 specifically. Jamal Murray, same thing, wasn't shooting well from 3 at all. It's just from the field in general too. But, you know, Ant, terrible, 6 for 24 last night. Had some big shots going to the rim, hit that big 3 late on a fast break that made it a 10-point game. And that's the first time it really felt like the game was out of reach. Yeah. At that point, they went on that big run. It was just a wild game. But I'm going to remember that on the T-Wolves side of things. On Denver's side, 2 things stick out to me. And they're both really on Mike Malone. I think Mike Malone's an elite coach. One would be him not changing, maybe having Jokic or someone else bring the ball up, maybe Aaron Gordon bring the ball up, take the pressure from Jamal Murray and Ant, and maybe get a different switch. You know, if you got Jokic bringing the ball up, you can have Murray set the screen, have him switch on, have Ant switch on to Jokic, that kind of thing. That small adjustment, and not getting Jokic out for more than a 1-minute breather in the second quarter when you're up double digits. I know it's a game 7. I remember specifically they had a lineup of Aaron Gordon at the 5, Porter at the 4, it would have been, and then, you know, Brown at the 3, and whoever they got in the backcourt. It was probably Caldwell Pope and Murray. That's a good lineup. And even if you let Minnesota get it to 8, you know, I think it's better to get Jokic the 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, it's a nitpick, really, but that's the first time you really saw Jokic worn out. You look at him, the way he runs and all that, you think he's worn out all the time, but he was truly tired and settling for threes. Made a couple big ones late, but I do think it's a different outcome. Maybe if you sit him for 4 minutes in the second quarter, 3 minutes, anything, bookend it with a timeout, maybe you get a different outcome. But also, if you get anything from Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, anybody, literally anybody outside of Murray and Jokic, you probably get a different outcome of that game. But
yeah.
Incredible game nonetheless. I still can't really believe that we're talking about a Timberwolves-Mavs conference finals, especially on the T-Wolves side of things. It's crazy. They just don't have a lot of big basketball moments in their history. So
that was,
you
could argue that might be the biggest game of their history.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
They That's that's the crazy thing. I mean, they went to the conference finals 20 years ago, the year KG won MVP, and other than that, they ain't got much. But you're right. I absolutely agree with the fact that you easily could have gotten Jokic a couple minutes out. Especially when Jamal Murray's cooking like he was, he didn't need Jokic to cook like he was. He was doing whatever he wanted.
Even just a couple minutes. Just a couple minutes. Doesn't have to be a full 4 or 5 minutes, just 2 or 3, and call timeout.
Absolutely.
Or place it around a TV timeout, something. There was something there they could have done.
There were so many smart, thinking back, Eric Spoelstra used to do this, and LeBron used to have this on the Cavs with Ty Lue. They used to do sub him out about a minute and a half left in like the first quarter. And so he got that plus the TV commercial between quarters. So like he got, you sub him like a minute and a half before the TV timeout, which is obviously elongated. So you get that plus you get that break. They did that with LeBron all the time. That's just the first person that comes to my mind because obviously we know LeBron has played 48 minutes in playoff games, but he's also someone who perpetually plays about 42 plus. But they did Ty Lue plus Eric Spoelstra did a good job of spelling him. In Miami, it didn't matter as much because you still had Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. But obviously in Cleveland, when you only had Kyrie, or not Kyrie, you needed to spell him a little bit more. So I agree. They should have definitely sat Jokic a little more. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. But when you have a rotation of bigs like Karl Anthony Towns, Gobert, and Naz Reid, it's just physically going to wear on a person. Like, it doesn't matter who. Like, Jokic is one of the most conditioned athletes you'll ever see. Like, obviously, he can play in a game, knows how to use his body for 48 minutes, but it's just, at some point, you're going to get tired. And the altitude,
47 minutes. 47 minutes is rough for anybody.
In that altitude, regardless if they practice in it, it still definitely can affect you a little bit more. So, this
physical series. I mean, they're facing. I mean, the NBA season after the break turned into 90s and 2000s ball, and it often does in the postseason anyway. I read something about the games with Mark Davis in this series. Minnesota was allowed to be much more physical. Those were the 2 blowout games, I believe. I think it was games 2 and 6, maybe. Yeah. Right. And those both happened to be, and I might have got the games wrong. Could have been like 2 and 4 for Mark Davis or whatever, but he was involved in like a couple of the games where the Nuggets did not get a lot of foul calls. And, McDaniels and Edwards were just, much more physical with Murray in those games. So it's interesting. Like, just the ref trends and this and that. I don't even know if Mark Davis was the ref last night, but it's interesting. I can't wait to see that matchup versus Luka Doncic. He's obviously a bit more physically stronger than Jamal Murray, so he'll be able to handle McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. I'll be interested to see how Kyrie handles one or the other. Sounds like Ant said he's already got Kyrie. That's his matchup, so I'm very interested to see.
We'll see if he can put the seatbelt on.
How someone as crafty as Kyrie can find a shot against him. But
absolutely,
it's going to be an interesting.
And going in Game 7 here, traditional, what we expected. I said 102-96 Nuggets. You thought it was going to be under 100 for both teams. You were correct, under 100 for both teams. And then we go to the other Game 7, the one that started earlier. The exact opposite of a traditional Game 7. The Pacers put up 130, shoot 67% from the floor, better than anyone in the history of ever in the playoffs. What did you think about that game in New York?
One last point I want to make about Denver T-Wolves was just quick that will get lost in history is T-Wolves going to the bonus like 8 minutes. 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And I think that was a huge part. I mean, that's another one where you got to wonder, like, if they go into the bonus under 4 minutes, how much difference does that make? Because Gobert just got a lot of free foul shots. So, this game, I mean, you got the clip of B saying, like, no matter what, even if this goes to 7, Pacers ain't winning. And they had about as good of an offense, like a perfect offensive performance. They shot 67% from the field. That's really the game. On top of New York not being able to have anybody healthy. They finally lose Brunson, of all people. And I say finally just because of just the wear and tear of everybody. It was literally, next man up. Weird game, weird energy. It seemed like the Knicks were saving up for the second half. You saw them make a run there, trying to get it to 6. DiVincenzo played incredible. That'll get lost in history. Had himself a Ray Allen type game.
He had his Klay Thompson game 6 performance and
right?
Just 39.
I mean, if you're a Knicks fan, you got to feel excited about the future regardless.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The conference final was in their fingertips, but hey, we got an aggressive Halliburton. We got a great Siakam game, and you got Miles Turner on the fringes, and you got, people like Neesmith. McConnell played an amazing game. McConnell actually answered the question for me, Keenan. What would it look like if Matt Crescenzi was in the NBA? So I'm glad I got that question answered for me. So I mean, I'm glad you appreciate that.
Oh,
but
man.
I mean, look, the Pacers are deep, and they'll be able to, push the pace. They'll do that against Boston. We'll talk about that series here in a sec, and I think that'll make for an incredibly fun series, Boston, because they can play that style just as easily as a slowdown game. So I think we're due for a fun series when it comes to those two teams. I was surprised, but not surprised. I was surprised that they handled it that well. I was not expecting, because you just never know what you're getting from Halliburton at this point, it seems like, in big games. But you do know they can push the pace, and they completely control the game from the tip. Yep. So props to them. I thought it was going to go more New York's favor. I thought they were going to slow the game down, make it ugly, much like the next game we saw. But Pacers were in complete control. And kudos to them. If you would have told me this is going to be our Final Four before the playoffs or at any point during the season, I would have said you're crazy. I guess also, Keenan, this might be a big win for the in-season tournament, given that the Pacers made it this far. I mean, I don't know. There's I don't want to say there's something to it. I guess they kind of lucked into it with all the injuries the Knicks had, but you couldn't have a better outcome for the winner of the in-season tournament than having them actually get to the conference finals and win big games in both first 2 rounds. So props to the Pacers, props to the Knicks too. And I think we're going to have a fun series. I'll obviously give my predictions here in a little bit, but I want to hear what
absolutely.
you have to say.
Regardless of the injuries, I was still shocked. I'm not going to change it because I knew Brunson was going into the series, and then Josh Hart. Obviously, we knew he had the abdominal strain, but Josh Hart got that in Game 6. But Josh Hart was playing, and then they said OG was playing, and even without OG, I still thought that the Knicks were pulling out this game. And by the time Brunson got injured, the game was already out of question. So it wasn't like Brunson got injured and that's why they lost.
They made a late run at it too, even without Brunson. Alec Burks tried to bring him back.
Alec Burks had the type of Game 7 game where he's just like that random guy goes off in a big spot, and that was Alec Burks. He did exactly what the random guy in Game 7 does. They just didn't have the horses to go along with him. So kudos to the Knicks. You guys have such a bright future. It's going to be interesting what you guys do this offseason. If you do keep Julius Randle, try to run everything back. If you guys do make a move there, obviously what free agent signings. And with people seeing the atmosphere and playing with Jalen Brunson, you're probably more likely to get free agents. I know there's a little bit of point of time where New York, you're like, wait, it's James Dolan? Or I'm not going there. Why would I go to New York? But now it's more of an attractive environment to go to. Obviously, the New York fans have always been great. And then otherwise you have Jalen Brunson, you have Dante DiVincenzo, you have Josh Hart, the Nova Knicks, plus everybody else there. But one thing that I did want to point out was Tyrese Halliburton in a win compared to a loss. Like, the success of the Pacers, I knew obviously had to do with Halliburton's aggressiveness, but I didn't realize how much of the Indiana aggressiveness it really came down to Tyrese Halliburton.
It's night and day.
So in wins, Tyrese Halliburton's averaging 21 points and close to 9 assists, 48% from the floor, 34 from 3, but he's taking 17 shots, and they're plus 137 with him on the floor. So basically they're plus 17 on average with him on the floor per game. When those are the wins. In losses, 15 points a game. He actually shoots better efficiency because he barely takes as many shots. He doesn't take as many shots. It's 51 from the floor, 45 from 3. averages only 11 shots instead of the 17, and one of that's inflated because one of the games he had 35 in a loss, only 7 assists. So really, essentially what that's saying there is Halliburton's aggressive, they're probably going to win or they have a very good chance at it. Halliburton's not aggressive. He's also minus 14 in that, like every loss. They're getting blown off the floor. Essentially is what happens. How Halliburton doesn't understand all of this and just is aggressive every single game, I don't get. We don't get. We've talked about that multiple times here. And they can, if they shoot well and Halliburton's super aggressive all games, could they push it to 6? Maybe if they get hot. I don't see it. But if Halliburton's not, they can get blown. They can get blown out in 4. They can get swept off the floor. It really comes down to Halliburton if they want to win a couple games or if they don't want to win a couple games at all. But
yeah. I mean, honestly, if we would have got a Tyrese Halliburton cardio game yesterday, it probably wouldn't have mattered with the way Indiana shot.
Oh yeah.
But no, it makes the world a difference, and that's the difference, I guess. We talk about a superstar, this or that. That's the difference between a superstar and a star, or that's the difference between an elite player and someone who's on the rise. In Halliburton's case, and he's still young. Don't get me wrong. I think any GM in the league would want a Tyrese Halliburton on their team, but it is frustrating when you can see him flat out take over games. I mean, you went over some of the numbers last podcast, like 32 and 15s, 20 games. Like when you go from that to 8 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, it's visible how much of an effect that has on the team, especially when you're the point guard. It's one thing if you're
9-point in a 6-point game in these playoffs.
Yeah, and that's how he played a lot down the stretch, where you wouldn't know if he's going to crack 15 or if he's going to have his 28 and 13 type game, if he's going to be trying to get to the rim, this and that. So, I mean, I can't wait. I really it's actually. You can make a case that it's going to be a more fun series because I would have loved Knicks Celtics. Like everyone wanted to see that, obviously. But at the end of the day, it would have been, the Celtics nearly at full strength and eventually getting Porzingis back against Jalen Brunson and 5 other Knicks, really. So, I mean, their luck was going to run out eventually.
Yeah.
Their health luck, I should say. I mean, they got bad health luck too. But, I mean, just the string of being able to get these Jalen Brunson 44-point games, 48 minutes from Josh Hart, that was going to run out eventually. So, in a way, this might end up being the better matchup for the Celtics. I think the Celtics are going to win, obviously, and we'll get to that. But, again, kudos to the Pacers. Halliburton did his thing. Miles Turner did his thing. Siakam, he reminded me a bit of a baby Embiid yesterday. His game he's got, his one-on-one game's grown so much. And he'll either kind of face you up or take 2 dribbles to get to the rim. So he just reminds me of just like a leaner Embiid. His mid-range, he works from 18 feet and in. His game's just much more complete than it was years ago. So
best quiet trade I've maybe ever seen in my life. No one talked about it. And from a star to I mean, I think it's because of when it happened. It didn't happen at the deadline. Yeah.
Because I think people talked about it, but I think people were kind of like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like this
it was more like Siakam's on the Pacers. That's crazy.
That's going to help them. That must have been January, or probably happened a couple weeks before the deadline.
Yeah, it wasn't at the deadline, and so when it happened, it got talked about a little bit, but then it just got lost because of all the deadline moves from other teams. And then you thought about it again, you're going over playoffs teams, you're like, yeah, the Pacers do have Siakam. That's right. He's a champ. Yep. they do have Pascal Siakam to go along with Halliburton, to go along, good obviously.
Player.
That's crazy. And they have a championship coach, too. So that's
I'll say this. They're talented enough, not to cut you off, but they're talented enough to where it doesn't feel like the Hawks in 21. Right?
No.
It's definitely surprising, but at the end of the day, I was picking the Knicks off of, thinking it was going to be at their tempo. We were going to get a monster Brunson game like we've seen in these games, and then maybe a monster Josh Hart game. And, I felt obviously less confident in that once Hart got injured. And then they said OG's coming back, so you get a little confidence there. Obviously, he wasn't able to really go. Yeah. But, I mean, it even seemed like the Knicks were really going to turn it around there in the second half. But it was such at the Pacers' control But just given the two teams, how Indiana's got just much more talent, they're much more deeper than the Knicks. You would figure just off that you'd pick the Pacers, but again, Halliburton's just so inconsistent this postseason. Really, the second half of the season, you lean towards the Knicks, and that's why they were favored in that game. But hey, Indy did what they had to do. Like you said, Rick Carlisle, great coach. He clearly implored them to push the ball, just keep pushing the rock no matter what. Let's play our style, and it went their way.
Multiple times off made baskets. They're either getting open threes in transition or they're getting layups. That's just that style of play. You cannot
fun team to watch.
And that's why this series, regardless of if it's 4, 5, or 6, this series is gonna be fun to watch because, as you said, and we could probably segue this into actually talking about the games, but our next series. But Boston can slow the pace down, which is why Boston is the favorite, especially in the East, and especially now that the Nuggets are gone. Not that the Timberwolves can't beat them or whatnot, but they're definitely the favorites. Is they could, in a knockout dragout series, they could play with the Knicks. They could play at that style, but then they also can play at the Pacers style. When the Celtics are running and gunning. That's when they're maybe their most dangerous because that's getting JT out, it's getting Jaylen Brown out, that's getting Derek White open corner threes, Drew Holiday obviously, and then when Porzingis is there, the big guy who can run the floor plus also shoot from 25 plus. So they can play at both, and I think the Celtics are going to welcome playing at the Pacers pace, so I think this could be a high-scoring, just fun 4, 5, 6, hopefully 7 because I love 7-game series, but however many games it goes, I think this could be a fun series. Regardless, though, I think it's going to probably go 5, maybe 6 if Halliburton wakes up. But I'm going to have 5, and I think the Pacers lose in 5. I won't say Pacers win in 5. But the Celtics go on to the finals winning in 5 in this series.
I have it Celtics in 5 as well. Could see it as a sweep, but they do have a lot of talent. Just top to bottom, the Pacers really do have talent. Where they're going to struggle is they don't play any defense at all. They
get
can play
random
average
spurts
defense.
of 5 minutes of defense.
Right. They can get average NBA team defense, but that's not really going to matter versus Boston. Of course, Boston could always just take a game off. They're known to do that. So it could go 6. I think it's going to be a very competitive 5-game series. Like you said, I think that tilts the favor in Boston's hand if you're playing at a fast pace. It really does. That being said, maybe Siakam takes it up a level and he averages something like 25 and 8 or something like that. And if you got an aggressive Halliburton, there is enough there, especially without Porzingis. Porzingis is probably going to miss the first 2 to where you could push it to 6. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. At the same time, Boston, when you got Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, you got Hauser and Pritchard come off the bench. Every single one of them can shoot. Porzingis can shoot. Horford can shoot. Everybody on that team can shoot, and that's exactly what that style of play lends to. You're going to get a lot of slash and kick. So if you're going to have to outscore Boston at the end of the day and Boston can defend you, unless Halliburton really takes it up a level to what, like we said, in-season tournament, first 6 weeks Halliburton, where you can get to 32 and 15 and some boards and, providing some defense. Yeah, then it could be a 5-6 game series, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a very entertaining 5-game series.
Yep.
I think we'll see some close ones. And Boston's had time off. So, they're going to be ready to run.
Game 1 honestly, could be semi-interesting just because it's hard. It's weird because the Pacers will be coming kind of off the emotional Game 7, but Boston's been sitting out for a little bit of time. So early on, I think the Pacers could get out. I think the Pacers possibly could win Game 1. Boston would absolutely take Game 2, and then they would steal at least one in Indiana. So I think it could be 2-2 going back to Boston, then they win 5 and 6. But if not, I think the Pacers do get one. So I think it's 5, if not 6, and it depends on Game 1. I think if the Pacers are going to steal one in Boston, it will be Game 1.
I would be surprised, but hey, Cleveland and Miami each got one in Boston. But
yeah, they're 15 and 15 or something close to that in the playoffs over the last few years at home for some reason.
Yeah, which is weird because they were pretty much unbeatable at home.
Like in the regular season, they've seemed to be unbeatable at home. In the playoffs, it seems to be a coin flip. So it wouldn't shock me if the Pacers won. Like if the Celtics won in 5 and they won both road games, it would shock me almost less than if they lost a home game, because they just seem to say like, hey, here's one home game every playoff series. It's like, okay, I guess if you guys want it, I guess.
That would be my main criticism of Jason Tatum is, the team takes on the personality of two people. Oftentimes it's either the coach or their best player. And Jason Tatum's just like a cool, laid-back guy. And clearly Boston takes – like that's why I was so against the Marcus Smart trade, because I'm like, all right, who's really going to be the leader, the dog in the clubhouse, which it's probably Al at this point is like probably the emotional leader. And probably Drew Holiday too. But – Tatum's, he is a dog. Don't get me wrong. He shows up in game 7. He shows up in big games for sure. But, oftentimes you can just get that too cool for school performance from him, like we saw against the Cavs in game 2, where they were just like, we're good. The Cavs just showed up and blew him out. Donovan Mitchell was the best player on the floor. Credit to the Cavs in that regard. But I don't know. They have too many games like that in the Tatum era. Don't get me wrong. Again, he's going to show up in big games, but they lose too many games they should win too. But that's also on the coach as well.
You're never afraid. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where like the difference sometimes between Udoka and Missoula can kind of be felt a little bit, but like not that Missoula's done a great job, I think, this year too. I think sometimes it's almost undersold just because people are like, oh, this team has so much talent. Well, but we've seen plenty of teams that have a lot of talent that don't win 64 games. So you have to obviously give the coach credit, exactly, especially where it's due.
Especially when he was thrown into the job too. He didn't ask to be at the job.
Just like, hey, here you go. But I agree with that. Like sometimes Jason Tatum's demeanor, it really is cool, which is why in big games he's never like, you never see him flustered, because he's really just cool. Like he's just gonna go do his thing. But there are times where you need that extra oomph. Like the Warriors, obviously they have Draymond to give him that extra oomph. Like Steph obviously can have fire. We've seen it in time, but it's more so just like Draymond's going to bring it. Steph's going to be kind of even keeled here, and then Klay Thompson's kind of do his thing. Obviously Marcus Smart, as you said, that's really what he was. Like Marcus Smart wasn't afraid to go get a technical to fire somebody up kind of thing. And like sometimes coaches
somebody.
Or shove somebody or like do something like little things just to wake them up.
That's what worries me the most, and that's what's frustrated me the most the last few years with the Celtics team is like who's willing to go out and fight somebody. You know what I mean? Timberwolves have that. If this was a hypothetical Timberwolves-Celtics matchup, Celtics probably got the better team, but the Timberwolves are probably the tougher team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially after going through Denver. So,
and even the Mavericks.
It's interesting.
Like Luka's tougher. Like I mean, look, obviously everyone complains a lot, but like Luka's. You feel a little bit more toughness out of the Mavericks a little bit, just at times. Just like their demeanor's not always as
in a way. I mean, yeah. I mean, Luka's a killer. I mean,
Luka's a killer. Like, yeah.
But I mean, I don't think
they're not the Timberwolves. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make them sound.
Yeah, I don't think the Mavs got some junkyard dogs on their team, much like the T-Wolves, or even some of the Celtics in their way. They're Celtics are more quiet killers, but no, I mean the Celtics.
If you had some of IT's Celtics team, just like that mentality infused in this team, they might already be champions.
I've said that on here. Like that's why I absolutely love the IT era into the Kyrie era, because all the role players were some fucking dogs, bro. Like, and Hooper's on top of that. Like if Kyrie was a leader at all. I mean, that 19 team should have...
Bucks series.
That 19...
They won game 1. They lost 4 straight. He just says, I'm done.
Kyrie absolutely quit. But, I mean, if he was a leader at all and there was camaraderie that 19 year, I mean, the amount of talent that was on that team it's insane. It's still insane that team was together. It's almost similar to OKC almost with what they got going on here. But that's besides the point. No, if they had players from that era, I mean... it does help that Jalen and Jason played with them and played with Marcus Smart and all that. So that does carry over to some degree, and they got plenty of experience, really more experience than anybody left in the playoffs for such a young team. So that's all going to lend itself. But I do think that's one thing with the Pacers. I do see like Neesmith getting under like some of their guys' skin. So I think in McConnell, those are players who will get under the Celtics' skin in this series. So we will get to see a little bit of that, like how they react.
Pritchard seems to be a guy who can kind of get under people's skin from time to time, but like
he's pretty laid back.
The Peyton Pritchard TJ McConnell matchup's going to be one for the ages in the playoffs.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Pritchard and McConnell, that could be. You talk about a white boy summer, that could be, that could get it started.
That's going to be one of the greatest matchups. Oh man, who can play better backup point?
For real. Pritchard's hilarious. Pritchard will pull up from 30 and not give a fuck. Like he'll sometimes look like the best player on the floor for like 2 minutes. But
before we go into the other series, one thing I wanted to mention that I watched from McConnell, I watched it twice because it made me laugh because I didn't know if he said it what I thought. They showed like it was kind of like an upshot of like him shooting a little like 7-foot floater on the side. It was a tough shot because he was like kind of fading behind the backboard. He made it, and you could just read his mouth. He was like, "My God!" Like he was just that dog for hitting that shot. I was like, I rewinded it because I was like, "Did he just say what I think he said?" And I went back. He looked at kind of almost at the camera. Was like, "My God!" Like I'm that kind of guy doing this in New York. I was like, "All right, TJ." All right, TJ.
I'm becoming a TJ McConnell fan. Like I've always liked his game, but I mean, he's like, I want to say a playoff villain, but he's just one of those playoff role players. You can just put him in any series on any team, and he's going to make an impact somehow. Like just from his peskiness to like, he's a great defender. He did a great job on Jalen Brunson. He made him work the entire series. So he will be heard from in this Celtics series. Like I said, him and Neesmith, if they can not only, especially McConnell, if he can make an impact on offense and defense like he did in the Knicks series, and on top of that, just like get under people's skin and just wear people out with his energy. And you get some good shooting and slashing from Neesmith, and he's getting under people's skin. Yeah, you can, on top of Halliburton playing well, again, you can push it to a 6-game series. Like, there is a world.
Absolutely.
And I'd rather see that. I want this to go 6. I don't think it's going to, but I would desperately like it to be a long series.
I would like it to at least be 6. I mean, I of course want 7 because like Game 7s just bring out the best in everybody. Obviously, we saw Tatum go for 51 in a Game 7 last year, but like I would love a Game 7. I'd love another Game 7, but that to me, I want at least 6, if not 7, or if it's going to be a competitive 5, I'm cool with it. But the more basketball games we get, the better. But a game series that I think is going at least 6, if not 7. This Mavs and Timberwolves series over here. What do you think? What are your initial thoughts on it? You don't have to give your instant prediction of who you think's winning, but what's your initial thoughts on it?
I don't have any feel at all for how this series is going to go. No. I really don't.
No.
It's weird because, I mean, in the OKC Mavericks series, I picked the Mavs, but it felt like the better team lost. Felt like OKC was the better team. I feel like Mavericks won based off of, exploiting the Thunder's weakness with, the offensive rebounding with their size. And, they end up shooting the ball better, too. Shouts to SGA, though, because he went crazy, especially in Game 6.
I was kind of hopeful that he was going to put – he put the team on his back late. And one thing that he might have less expression than Kawhi. Like
he's up there. He's just a cool cat. Like he's just like Tatum, just like Kawhi. Like I'm a show up. I'm gonna lace up my Converses, and I'm gonna get 30 to 35.
He doesn't even complain.
25
like Kawhi,
to 35 for sure.
Kawhi, as he's reached like superstar status, has started to complain for calls a little bit. Like you'll see it, like his hands go up in his arms, like what do you mean? He won't like yell at refs or anything. Even Shea on that last one. Like where, like obviously, like he kind of pulled his hand back and obviously kind of hit him on the arm, but still had the ball. Didn't really say anything. Just like I didn't do anything. Like he just doesn't talk. He literally just doesn't talk. It's hilarious because like he's giving you 35 and he's just not saying a word. You're like, okay, all right, Shay, you keep doing you. You keep doing you.
But truly, I have no feel for the series. Just I don't know why. I mean, it was completely in the realm that the Timberwolves could win. Obviously the Mavs went out and actually won. But I don't know. I think I was so focused on having maybe or poised to have a Jokic versus Doncic matchup finally. And now we get more of a perimeter based matchup, even though the T Wolves have size. But now you're looking at Ant versus Luka as far as the leaders of the team. And you want to say, like, okay, the size is what gave the Nuggets problems. Well, that should give the Mavericks problems in theory. But the Mavericks have their own size, and they play a much different style of basketball than the Nuggets. So I don't know. I can't picture the Mavericks in the finals. It seems like the Timberwolves would be poised to win this, especially after just taking down the champions, the defending champions. So you would have to give them the leg up because it's like, all right, you're going to go to war with the Nuggets, then you're going to go and lose to the Mavericks, who I don't think anybody really could have envisioned them in the finals. Like I don't watch sports TV anymore. I don't watch ESPN or anything like that, but I'm going to guess not many people had the Mavericks in the finals, let alone the conference finals. Like conference finals, you can see it, but
it's like conference finals, I had them there, but finals, I did not think they were getting to the finals.
I'll say this. It seems like T-Wolves in 6. Seems like that. Seems like that. Now Luka could go and average 35. Right? If Jamal Murray, I know he slowed down the second half because of Ant.
I mean, if it was a regular season, he'd be out for a couple weeks. So I don't think he can.
Exactly. And really, well, here's the thing. Luka might go off, but what are they going to get from Kyrie? Kyrie was not great in the last series. I mean, we praised him for like his control of the game and his defense, but offensively, that's probably the worst series of his career as far as shooting, as far as scoring, as far as all that. And now he's going to have Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels pressing up on him, like playing physical defense. I'm not saying Kyrie can't handle it, but listen, Kyrie's certainly taken a half step back. Kyrie's still Kyrie, but he's not 2016. I see Steph Curry. I see red Kyrie Irving right now. So, I mean, that's to me, if you get anything, if you can get 20 points a game and on from Kyrie, like maybe 20 points, 6-7 assists, something like that, you're going to have more than a chance. But if he's playing how he played this past series against OKC, it won't really matter what Luka does. And it won't, I mean, unless PJ Washington's going to average 21 and 7 again or something like that, it's not really going to matter. Unless he goes pure point guard and averages 12 assists and he's creating for everybody because he's getting into the paint. That's going to be really the key to the series to me, because Minnesota can really just talent their way through it to some degree. Don't get me wrong. Luka's going to dissect that defense. Luka's going to be ready. They're going to get 3-point shooters. If they get Kleber back, that will be huge.
Yes.
If they get Kleber back at all, I don't know what his status is, but if he can pull Rudy out of the paint for a little bit, that'll make somewhat of a difference. And much like the Pacers, the Mavericks aren't great on defense either, but they showed they could lock down a little bit. They gave the Thunder problems. So they got more of a defensive upside than the Pacers. So I don't know. It feels like T-Wolves in 6. I would love a 7-game series, obviously, like you mentioned. But it feels like T-Wolves in 6, and it, feels like they should be the favorite in the series, and I'm sure they are favored. So,
yeah. So I'm in the same boat as you, where like I was just unprepared for this series, because even though there was a realistic nature that the Timberwolves could upset the Nuggets, you had to see it truly to believe it, because they're the defending champions. They have the 3-time MVP. They've been a well-oiled machine over the last couple years. So you're like, Can this younger team really bring them down? And they did. And so you're like, okay, now you're prepared against a Mavs team that is not fully, like, the Timberwolves are better suited to play against the Mavs than vice versa. So you've got Daniel Gafford, you've got Derek Lively. Those are two people who can rebound well, but obviously they don't match up exactly with the size of Karl Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert. I really think it's going to be a lot of the series. I think is going to have to be Luka exploiting Rudy Gobert, because they're going to play him minutes. If you can pull him away from the basket, if you can get him in one-on-one situations to get the massive rim protection away from the rim. I mean, obviously, Karl-Anthony Towns is showing that he can protect the rim pretty well. So Naz Reid can get some block shots too, but it's obviously not the same length as Rudy Gobert. That, and then Kyrie needs to get going for 48 minutes. A lot of the games he was trying to pick his spots in the second half more so than the first half. He can't do that. Anthony Edwards is going to see Kyrie early and is going to see Ant late. Or he's going to see Luka late. So like Luka would have to go for a 40-point triple-double if Kyrie doesn't show up. I mean, could he? Possibly. I don't put anything out of the realm of possibility for Luka. But he's hurt, so he probably can't do anything other than 27, 9, and 9. But regardless, I'm leaning Timberwolves in 6 as well, honestly. Maybe set, because I think if it gets to a 7th game, even though they just beat Jokic in Denver, it's still hard for me to see Luka in a game 7. Well, that's what I want. I would love to see Luka in a game 7, but it's hard to see him lose like those greats. But I mean, Anthony Edwards is trying to show himself as being on that level with Luka, with Jokic, with all of them too. So I'm leaning Timberwolves in 6 on this just because I think they match up better with the Mavericks. They have more guard depth and wing depth to guard Kyrie and Luka. They've got more size in the paint to control the boards. They can also shoot threes. They all can shoot threes pretty well, obviously other than Rudy Gobert. So they have kind of everything built. And now looking at it now, I had them on the outside, like right there on the outside of the playoffs because I was like, the West is so deep. And you were like, no, this team's got a lot of talent to it. They're well put together. And I think that the two bigs, which I didn't think was going to work out like it did, you said it was going to work out better. Not that you even expected this, but you expected more out of them than I did.
Not this quick.
You expected more out of them because I remember when you were talking about it, you're like, this year I think they get to the playoffs, maybe get to a second round, and then next year could be the year for them. So kudos to you for that because you did see something that I didn't, because I did not think the Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns experience was going to work at all. And that trade now looks better.
I mean, it makes sense because, Towns is a perimeter player. I mean, he's not like a guard compared to like, I thought Jamal Crawford, by the way, Jamal Crawford's killing it. On these commentaries. I thought he was okay in the beginning, but like, he's really got a great feel for what's going on in the game, how to express what's going on, how to articulate himself. Like he
reads players future. Really well. And that's a thing that's a skill he has in like reading players very well. So like, he reminds me a lot
of Doug Collins back in the day because he was one of the better color commentators back in the day. And Crawford, for whatever reason, reminds me very much of him. And he's real laid back on the call too, which usually can go bad, but like he finds a way to make it work because he articulates the game so well. But he called Naz Reid a big guard yesterday, basically. And that's essentially what he is. He really does play more like a guard, even though he is a 7-footer or 6'11". So, but no, that's why I thought Towns and Gobert would work was, not that they play a ton of high-low, but you can basically run that action with those two. Towns can play on the perimeter, prefers to a lot of the time, honestly. And they're just good players. They're good, smart players. And they had the coach to make it work. If there's another coach in there who doesn't have a feel for a team or, doesn't know how to make rotations work, maybe that is a disaster. But once again, props to Towns because he's grown up a lot, especially in these playoffs. And he still had a couple bad games and he still has a lot of stupid fouls. But I was extremely impressed with him from games, 4 through 7. I mentioned the game where I think it was game 5 where he got hurt. He gutted it out. He wasn't complaining and was just hooping, was just playing. Like he didn't have a crazy stat line, but he was giving his all just to win a game.
And same really last all night.
You can ask for. And last night, I mean, he
has his knee fell. The one they had surgery on, someone fell into his knee. He limped it off a little bit, kind of flexed it a little bit just to try to straighten it out as much as possible. And you didn't see him really limping or wincing again. He just got it through, and his knee's in pain, especially that surgery's not 100% healed. Mm-hmm. I guess he's definitely still feeling the effects of it.
Coming back from a meniscus, but back to the matchup in general with the Mavericks, I mean, I almost think the Timberwolves would welcome the switch on Gobert to Doncic. You know what I mean? I think that's a good matchup for them at the end of the day, because what's Luka going to do? He's going to try to get to the rim. Maybe could get a step on Gobert, but Gobert could have the length there. If you want to shoot your step back over Gobert, I think Minnesota would be very happy with that. If he's trying to do the step back Luka versus the likes of Towns, Reed, and Gobert. Maybe not Nas Reed as much. You could probably cook him, but Towns and Gobert, they could probably get a hand up on him or give him some problems. So I'm very, like I said, if Kleber comes back, then you can really pull Gobert out of the paint and just let Luka cook.
I just read on it, and Jason Kidd says that because before it was looking like he was out indefinitely and probably out for the playoffs. He was been doing some like light practice work, some defensive slides, things like that. Been trying to get back into the groove of it a little bit. And Jason Kidd did not rule him out for being like out for this series. I think it'd probably be towards a game 4 or 5, because they said they'd reevaluate him in 3 weeks.
It's a shoulder, right?
Yeah, dislocated shoulder.
It's dislocated. Yeah, so he's probably not coming back because that kept Kevin Love out the entire postseason in 2015. So
probably
he's
not
coming back.
They said he's definitely progressing, and so I think it would have to be probably like anywhere past game 5. It's not likely, and then maybe, and like if they get to the finals, that'd be more of a likely chance that he's able to return, because they said they'd reevaluate him in 3 weeks was the time frame to see what that is, and obviously reevaluation doesn't mean he's coming back at that point. So most likely not, but there is a slight chance that there's that he could return either late series or finals if they get there.
I'll say this, Keenan. Mavericks, Timberwolves, it could be the series we thought the Nuggets, Timberwolves was going to be ultimately, because we're going to remember Game 7 from Nuggets, Timberwolves, but ultimately it wasn't that great of a series. The only 2 good games you really got was Game 1, Game 5, and Game 7, right? Yep. Game 5 was Jokic going, God mode, basically. He just went insane.
He played a perfect game.
And Game 7 was an actual classic, and Game 1 was relatively close. Like, I think Minnesota pulled away, kind of like last night. They pulled away with like 2 minutes left type game. So I would have expected most of the games to be a bloodbath, especially Game 6, and, Nuggets lose by 40. So I think it's going to be much more competitive game to game than Nuggets T-Wolves was. It's an interesting matchup because, again, like the T-Wolves got all that size. The Mavs are obviously more perimeter based, and their bench isn't necessarily deep, but it's all guys who can at least shoot, or you got a guy like Exum who can turn it up on defense a little bit. So you got guys you can throw in and kind of can make an impact, maybe like a Hardaway Jr. He can hit some threes. But, it's all going to start and end with Luka. And again, the X factor to me is Kyrie.
I agree.
If you get the Kyrie we got in the first round, then, all bets are off. They will have as good of a chance as anybody, right? But if we're getting 8 points a game, Kyrie, it should be the Timberwolves. But never know. We've never seen the Wolves in this spot. And again, it's a different Minnesota now. And Anthony Edwards is that dude. He seems to be. Duke was blowing us up about it today. We got to get Duke on again here soon. But
we'll see obviously when you're going against the Nuggets, you go against the Suns, who have the big 3, and you're a younger team. Obviously, you have the higher seed, but you were not favored in that series. You go against the Nuggets, and people are starting to get on that bandwagon, but you're going against the Nuggets. You're not the favorites. I think they're now the favorites in this, so I feel like they have more like expectations on them than they have ever, really. So we'll see if the expectations bother and can like kind of rattle them a little bit. I think they'll stay even keel. They've got a good coach. Anthony Edwards is a dog, of course, but like we'll see what the expectations do, because I think the Mavs are coming in as the underdog right now. So
yeah, I mean, you know what? It reminds me of I think it was 2015 when the Clippers beat the Spurs in the first round, and it was a 1-8 matchup, but it really wasn't a 1-8 matchup. I think it was one of the years that like the West was completely loaded, and the Spurs were still the Spurs, and Clippers ultimately pulled it off, which was crazy. Like Game 7 was crazy. Like that whole
That was the same night as like the Mayweather De La
Mayweather
Hoya
Pacquiao.
fight.
Mayweather Pacquiao.
Mayweather Pacquiao fight, because Chris Paul had the game winner over Tim Duncan. Randomly
Wild
enough.
game. That's one of the
Yes.
great game sevens. That was an insane
That was a really
game.
good game 7.
And
We were in
I
the
don't
AAU
think
tournament.
we were. We
We were
absolutely
at an
were.
AAU tournament because you guys went
We
out for
were.
the fight. I didn't end up going out with you guys to watch the fight afterwards, but you guys were out.
Yeah,
Went out.
I remember the whole entire team was like, "Yeah, we're gonna watch the fight." No one came. No one came to the fight. It was just me and Kyle Young. It was just me and
you
Kyle Young.
No
But
one-
I remember we were watching the game on the phone, waiting while the fight was on, or
Yep.
at this time the prelims, and yeah, couldn't believe. And Chris Paul was playing on like a pulled hamstring or a hampered hamstring, something like that.
Yeah, he wasn't
But-
top notch Chris Paul, health wise. That is.
And I don't even think the Spurs hadn't won the ring at that point, right? Or was it? No, that was the year after the ring, wasn't it?
It was a year after. Yeah,
That was a year after. That's crazy. It seems like it was before, but yeah, it was the year after. So, the Spurs, even as the 8th seed, it was very much, the defending champion Spurs. Like they were still that team. Clippers knocked them off, and it seemed like we were poised for, Warriors Clippers in the conference finals, and then the Clippers.
Memphis comes in.
No, not Rockets. That's the year they copped it up to the Rockets.
Oh yeah, because that was 15. That was 15. That was the year they copped it up to the Rockets, because then the Rockets lost in 5 to the Warriors. They just because that was the 3-2. James Harden was down, and wasn't that one. They were down 3-2. James Harden on the bench. Down.
Josh Smith, Corey Brewer, the Josh Smith, Corey Brewer game.
The
I remember.
game.
I remember. I didn't even Florida game.
Josh Smith and Corey Brewer, because they're from Florida. I was saying the Florida game. Josh Smith
came out of high school.
No, Josh Smith out of high school. Sorry, Corey Brewer was Florida. No, that was
he
Joe
played.
Al Horford now. So, yeah. Sorry, go on.
I think he played with Dwight. I think him, Dwight Howard, and Rondo had an AAU team, like famously in Atlanta or some shit. But yeah, imagine just going to a Saturday morning AAU tournament. You get a 8 a.m. game, and you got to face Josh Smith, Rajon Rondo, and Dwight Howard.
It was like when we faced that Canadian team that one time with Trent's team. They were just.
Yeah, thank God I was a spectator for that game and not a coach, because, not much would have happened. Nothing different would have happened, but I'm glad I got to spectate and watch that game. But it feels like that to me, just because the Timberwolves are also low key a cursed franchise, much like the Clippers. Not as cursed as the Clippers, but like the Timberwolves are certainly in the driver's seat to go to the finals. And even as I'm saying that, like I will still have to physically see them in the finals versus whoever it is, probably Boston, to believe it, because it just sounds weird saying it, and everyone talking about it today, talking about looks like the Timberwolves are gonna make it to the finals. Like I'll have to believe it to see it. And it just very much feels like that Clippers-Spurs year, where the Clippers actually get over the hump against the Spurs, like beat a legit team, like as fair and square as possible, even though there was some shit after that game, after the Chris Paul shot. I don't know if you remember this, but they ran a play and something happened with the scores table to where like the play developed and they actually saw it. Like I remember Pop and like the owner, is it the owner or the GM? They lost their shit after that. But it reminds me very much of that, because then the Clippers, it looked like they should have just beat the Rockets and we were going to get Clippers-Warriors, which was a hot rivalry at the time. We just didn't get it. Like, the playoffs happened. The Clippers happened in that case.
Then,
so I do wonder if it's a case of that.
And that right there, not that the Warriors wouldn't have beat the Clippers or couldn't have beat the Clippers, but the Rockets were definitely not the team the Clippers were. Like depth-wise,
No.
like obviously you had the rivalry, and maybe we don't get the dynastic Warriors run without the Rockets upsetting. We don't. Obviously, we never know, because obviously if the Clippers do get to the finals that year, we see what happens, and then obviously the next year,
Blake Griffin was playing out of his mind.
That was the best I've ever seen Blake Griffin.
That was the peak of Blake Griffin. Like you could have made an argument he was a top 5 player at the time, because he had just like figured shit out. Much like Anthony Edwards.
Not better
now.
than Quincy Acey, though.
Camden. We got to get Camden back on. Shouts to Camden. That was famous prediction by Camden.
For people, obviously, because this is just a random shout out. But Camden, we were playing basketball at Lowell before an AAU practice, I believe. And Camden said that Russ Smith was going to be Allen Iverson, and that he said that Quincy Acey in 3 years, this was like 2012, was going to be better, or like 2013, 2014, was going to be better than Blake Griffin. So
it was bold. We don't really know how he came to that conclusion of Quincy Acey specifically,
like
but
Quincy
we're glad he had
Acey.
the confidence. And guess what? Maybe 10 years later, he made a get. Around this time last year, he said, hey, the Thunder are going to be a 2 seed. They actually excelled his expectations. Were a 1 seed and didn't make it to the conference finals, but we're close. We're a true contender this year. So his predictions definitely got better. By the way, speaking of the 1 seed, 2 seed, I think I mentioned earlier in the playoffs, like how the Nuggets coughing up that game against the Spurs late in the season could have ramifications. It truly did. If they don't lose that game, maybe they don't see the T-Wolves until the conference finals. Maybe they don't see the T-Wolves at all. So, man, this was a great NBA season. It truly has been a great season. I talked my shit about it. I definitely have my my complaints about the NBA, about Adam Silver, and about where the league has been, and is going. But I think it's in a better place than it was 5 years ago. So,
yeah.
And we're going to get another new champion in the 2020s, too.
And it's because, I was going to say, that's why. A lot of it feels better because the last 6 years, the team that won the championship hasn't even gotten to the conference finals the next year. There's someone different every year, so there's more people to root for, and then there's not these super teams to where like it was in the 2010s it was LeBron in the finals, and then the second half it was LeBron versus the Warriors. That was pretty much like that's what you thought, and then you're like the Warriors are gonna win 3 out of 4 times because they're gonna have Kevin Durant for half of them, and it was like okay, that was just your reality, and it was like okay. This is cool. So looking back on it, there wasn't that, oh, here's Kevin Durant. Oh, here is Steph Curry. Here is LeBron, because we've obviously talked about it ad nauseum. Kevin Durant took that away. But now you've got, okay, now here's Jokic. Here's Anthony Edwards. Here's Shea. Here's Luka. All just in the same playoffs. And that's just that side. Mm-hmm. In the East, there's Jalen Brunson. There's Jason Tatum. There's Joel Embiid. We'll see what Jimmy Butler and the Heat can do. TJ McConnell. But like, there's just so much there, and then there's still like, oh, what about those old guys? What about LeBron, Steph, and KD? Can they have one more run in them too? And then who's gonna come up through the works? Because obviously there's that 7'5" alien in San Antonio that's just saying, hey, trade me Trae Young, and we'll be just fine.
It's going to ruin it for everybody in a couple of years here.
He might. And then there's still that Greek freak in Milwaukee that's like, yes, don't forget about me. Like, I'm still here too. So every team has like one superstar, and then they have like great supporting cast around them, which is what gives you that kind of old school feel with it, rather than just like these super teams, like where you have a bunch of top 10, top 5 players or top 15 players on the same roster. Got a lot of depth.
This probably isn't the time, and I'm gonna miss LeBron when he's gone, and maybe we can do this when we ever have a LeBron career retrospective. But he's not the top dog anymore. Obviously, he hasn't been for a few years, as far as just constantly being in the conference finals or the finals.
Mm-hmm.
But man, because LeBron has a hold on the media in some ways. Like, for instance, Shams is a clutch client, right? And there was such a narrative around like when he left the Heat, right? That LeBron needed help, and that's why they lost against the Spurs, right? Mm-hmm. And that long became the thing with the super teams, was like, no, you need super teams because these stars need help. And you know me, I mean, it's the case I made for the Celtics against the Nuggets. We got in an argument or a good debate on here, I think in March, right? Where I said like, hey, and I actually came to fruition against the T-Wolves, but I was like, hey, the Celtics are the deepest team in the league. All it takes is a Porter Jr. bad series that maybe the Celtics can exploit that. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of always my case against a team like the Miami Heat in the early 2010s, We'd always get such and such needs help, to the point where it just made, and still has made, NBA fandom unbelievably toxic, right? Mm-hmm. You cannot have a nuanced NBA conversation anymore, it seems like, To the point where a couple years back, and this was still in the 2020s, but like a couple years ago when Ja missed a lot of games, I believe due to injury.
Yep.
And the Memphis Grizzlies, because they were so well coached and just a well balanced team, and just, you know, that's why I was so big on them this year. I think
the
if
the Warriors won the finals.
I think so, right? Where they had a good record without Ja, and people were like, Ja shouldn't be in the MVP conversation, or Ja's overrated because they have this record without him. And I'm
They were like 20 and like 8 or something like that. Like they were a really good, like 50 win pace team without him.
And I don't want to say everybody, but there was more of that coming from fans to where it's like
legitimate topics. It was
right.
legitimate topics.
And again, that shit is kind of pushed by ESPN and Fox Sports, and you know that's where really all of this got negative. But I mean, back in the day, you just call that good coaching or a good team. You know what I mean? Like the Spurs could thrive off that because they have such a good infrastructure. And instead of the context being, hey, Memphis has a good organization, they've got, you know, 2 through 10, a great team that can support Ja. Therefore, when Ja's playing, that makes him a contender. You know, people were trying to make that a detraction from Ja being a good player, which all it means is he has a good team and a great coach and, you know, good GM, obviously. And then last night was the first night in a while where Ant has a terrible game, 6 for 24, great defensive game, not the best offensive game.
Yeah.
And his teammates lift him, and I haven't heard any of that. I don't know if that's just because people like Ant more than Ja.
Yep.
But it is refreshing not to hear it.
It is great. I agree.
People
with
definitely
you.
People definitely play favorites. You're correct.
People play favorites, and if that same thing happened to LeBron James in Anthony Edwards' spot, 6 of 24, 16, 7 of 6, plays phenomenal defense, people would have said LeBron James got carried to that. And then other people would be fighting and be like, well, LeBron James is the greatest. So it's just like literally just 50-50 is what would happen there. It really, but I'm glad it doesn't, because it shouldn't. Like in today's media, if Mike left, obviously after the three-peat, left for a year and a half, came back, then they obviously lost to the Magic that year, but then they went on their second three-peat when he had a first full year back. Obviously, during that time, the Bulls were like I think a 54-win team the first year, and then they lost on a bad call in Game 6 to the Knicks, was it? Or 6 to, I think it was that.
Actually, I actually weirdly saw that clip today, Keenan.
Mm-hmm.
Very weird, because apparently today was the 30th anniversary of the Pippen over Ewing dunk. And so I saw that. I saw that on Twitter, and then under it had that they call it a phantom foul from Pippen on Hubert Davis, and it actually looked like a foul. Actually looked like I hadn't seen it in a long time, and they really only have one view of it, and it kind of looked like a foul to me. But some people would say it's a bad foul.
Yeah,
so
but
I can't really talk about
year,
it, but
and the reason why I bring up that year specifically is because in today's media, they would point to that Bulls team being good as why Mike's winning. And Mike's
which is part of the reason. Part of the reason,
you're right, but like they would make it
because of Phil though. That's the thing. It's because of Phil and because of
Scotty's great,
crew coach and all those guys. Yeah.
Scotty's great, Phil's great, but they would make it seem like Michael Jordan's less than because their team did that. Like their team has to be bad without him for Mike to be valued as great in today's media. But that's not the case.
I mean, again, we talk about this almost entirely too much. I feel like we come back to this, but hey, Bronze Sexuals Online did this, and then to some degree, Skip Bayless and them did this, and Nick Wrights and all of them. I mean, that's why we're here. Because, yeah, sports media was never perfect, but I can tell you it at least there was some nuance back in the day. And, yo, who was it? What was I reading the other day? I was reading something. It must have been a comment on Twitter or something, or maybe it was Reddit, but someone was saying how on Get Up, right? The ESPN morning show.
Yep.
That it was dead in the middle of the playoffs. So there was good series going on, this or that. And they either led the show or had a large segment of the show dedicated to the Dallas Cowboys somehow, and Dak Prescott.
Yep. That's their Dak Prescott. Is Dak Prescott going to have an underachieving season? Was something along the lines of that.
Trust me, we will have plenty of time for that from August and on. and onwards. So
you
there's
can
no
start.
need.
You can literally start it like a week after the finals is over.
The second the finals is over.
The second the finals is over, the next day, have your congrats to X team, because obviously it's one of 4. Congrats to you guys. Really one of 3. If the Pacers won the finals, I'd be dumbfounded. But congrats to this team. And then the next day, you can talk about Dallas. That's fine. That is perfectly fine. But we don't need to talk about the Cowboys right now. I don't want to hear about LeBron James because there's still topics about LeBron. I don't care about LeBron.
That's
right
pathetic.
Now. He's not important.
They're talking about LeBron right now on like ESPN and all that.
There are definitely segments that I've seen throughout because it's like on the Dick's TVs. Like we have TV, so like they're on those. I'll walk by
Dick's TVs.
We're all just walking. That sounds wild, but when I walk by and I'm like, wait a second, why are they talking about LeBron? And then one conversation was, I don't know why, I don't know if something happened in like the media, something was said, but one conversation was like, should Kobe be in the GOAT conversation was one of the topics, and I was like, where does this come from?
What is this, Instagram?
One, where does this come from? 1 and 2, no, but like I was like. I almost brought it up on here because it's like, why are we talking about this now? But no, he does not belong in the GOAT conversation. I know people are like, well, he was 95%. He was like the closest thing to Michael Jordan. That's cool. You want to know what he wasn't? Magic, Kareem, LeBron. Okay, I'm not going on with this, but just he's not in the GOAT conversation. He's just not. Sorry. But yeah.
I mean, I was gonna go somewhere. Sorry. I was gonna transfer this to WNBA, and I don't want to stay on it too long because it's getting later. But just the tangible difference in WNBA media coverage is crazy. And maybe they've always done these Saturday doubleheaders, but more than ever, and we knew this was coming, but more than ever does the WNBA feel like a thing. They've been pushing it on social media. That's where I'll give social media credit. Social media has been ahead of the game as far as WNBA goes, especially Instagram. So shouts to Instagram on that, and whoever's running like their social media teams, like whether it's League Fits, whether it's just the WNBA page in general, Ball is Life, like Slam Magazine, they do a great job of promoting the women's game. And now you're finally seeing, talk about ESPN, you're seeing ESPN follow suit, which is crazy because they air a lot of women's college basketball anyway. So you would have figured them in conjunction with the NBA themselves could have done a better job at marketing prior. That's another conversation, but it's glad that they finally caught up. But I say that to say, I saw the clips while I was at work. I'm looking at my phone. I see the clips of Caitlin Clark. I think she twisted her ankle or sprained her ankle early on in the game. She got a technical late in the game. I don't know if they end up winning this game or not.
They lost by 4. I was watching it before he got him.
I saw the clip of her deep 3 with like 3 minutes left. Like from the logo, she hits a big 3, clutch 3. And that play sounded like an NBA arena. I've never heard a WNBA arena sound that that sounded like a playoff game. Like that, They were loud, they were into it, and I'm like, hey man, they're here. They're here. And every Fever game's gonna be like that. Like they're gonna sell out every game, every home game. People are gonna come out to watch her on the road. Like she's already just making such an impact on the league. And she's, playing pretty good. She's not done anything insane yet. Like imagine when don't get me wrong, there's a chance she doesn't pop off, but we don't expect that. But if she really starts doing what she did in college and, starts having these, 30-point, 10-assist games with some deep threes and, just gets her Steph Curry on, that league's going to go to a different place. And especially if the Fever start winning on top of that, it's really going to go to a different place. And then that's going to obviously shine the light on all the other great players in the league. I saw Taurasi had a great game. I think opening night for them, she had like 7-3. She was cooking. Yep. So
Cam Brink has had some highlight plays. Angel Reese has been playing good basketball. Rakia Jackson off the bench for the Sparks has been playing good. I've been keeping up with it. There's been a lot of great basketball over, and then you have players like, it's great because your casual fans are seeing someone like Alyssa Thomas today, who I think had like 24, 12, and 7, something along those lines. She had a triple-double, 13, 10, and 13 in their first game. She was runner-up for MVP last year. And if I would have asked a lot of people who are now watching games who Alyssa Thomas is, they would have no idea. So it's
I
like,
wouldn't know.
yeah, no, that's the thing. Like, you get to watch these really good basketball players now because of Caitlin, which is why this is so great. But I'm going to put this here first. I am super hopeful that Paige goes number 1 to the Fever next year, and we get a Paige Caitlin backcourt. It will be,
that would be insane.
It's on the board. The Fever are 0-4.
It really is.
Fever are 0-4, and they're not going to be great. It's going to take them a while to get going to kind of understand.
If they're smart, let's get the NBA tactics in here now. I'm normally opposed to tanking, but if you can get Paige and Caitlin Clark and just you're good for the next 12 years. Like, come on, let's do this. Let's tank.
Paige and Caitlin, that's why Paige stayed back. She knows she's in touch with God somehow, and she stayed back because she's like, I can be on Caitlin's team. She's in touch with God somehow. I don't know. But, like, Paige and Caitlin can actually, like, legitimately happen because the Fever are going to have a lottery pick this year. They're not, unless Caitlin goes berserk, this team's not going to be a playoff team this year. And that's fine. It's legitimately fine. We just need, Caitlin needs to make highlight plays. They need to have close games. She needs a game winner and then a couple, like, she needs a 40-point explosion, just one of them. And that's all they need this year. Just get the fans there, get people talking, because no one really thinks the team's that great. They have Kelsey Mitchell, she's a good guard. Aaliyah Boston won Rookie of the Year last year. She's a good big. So, like, they've got some pieces there. Get the number 1 pick, draft Paige. Now Caitlin can play off ball more, so she's not just hounded 94 feet, and literally create the best women's backcourt we have ever seen. That's that. I'm putting it out there now. So when it happens, the year to hear first, Paige is going to be a Fever, or a Minnesota Link would make sense because she's from Minnesota.
Cynthia Cooper and Cheryl Swoops might have something to say about.
They listen. They're there, but my God, oh boy.
Now that'd be highlights if we got Paige and Caitlin Clark together because they would complement each other well. Listen, I think Caitlin. Just watching what I've seen, obviously she's coming from her college season. Mm-hmm. She looks a great deal smaller than most of the players who is guarding her. She looks noticeably smaller.
Absolutely.
So that, next year after she's in the gym all off season, they'll have a long off season, especially after the Olympics. I mean, if she's like putting on weight and then like, it could be on and cooking after that. And for Caitlin Clark, if that's all she needs is like to put on muscle, that's kind of scary.
And you think that, like, you have to think too, she started playing basketball. She has an NBA season this year, and then she's going to go into a WNBA season next year because she's gone from playing basketball. They had their crossover in Canuck, which is like their big football stadium, in like October-ish. I think it was in October. And then they started playing basketball in like November. And then she went obviously all the way to the finals. Then she has like a month break, and then she's back playing basketball until September. Maybe October, obviously, if they were to get to the finals, because this year it's a little elongated because of the fact of the Olympics. But, like, she's playing she's playing like 90 games this year. Like, in actually like a calendar season. And then she's going to have next year, she's going to have time to rest, where she's only worrying about basketball. She doesn't have to think about school because she was really good academically. So it's just getting stronger, learning teammates, getting better, come back next year, and this is what so like next year is really going to be the year for Caitlin where you're like, oh, this is what we signed up for. It makes sense why this year. I mean, she's having to adjust to everything on the fly. It makes sense. And she's still putting up 19 a game. She has high turnovers, but like if you look,
it's gonna happen.
Sabrina only played 3 games. She averaged 18 through those 3 games, and she got hurt. But, like, Kelsey Plum, obviously, she was the collegiate leading scorer when she when she went to the WNBA. She only averaged, like, 4 points a game. Jackie Young was the number 1 overall pick as a guard.
She averaged 4 points a game her rookie season?
Yes. It was. They were showing it today, and I remember Kelsey Plum, people talking about, like, okay, she's not going to really translate too much at the WNBA, like translate like she is at the WNBA level. But now obviously she's found her niche. But like, it's just people don't understand that it's going to take time. And that's what I was talking about. Like, I've talked about it before. They're grown women. Like, these people are actually. Hold on. Actually, I was a little sorry. She started off like in her first like 4 games. She was averaging only like 4. She ended up averaging 8 points on the season. She averaged 8 points, shot 35% from the floor.
It's funny. Like, you said that about, it's grown women. Taurasi said that when SVP was interviewing her after the national championship game, I believe it was, or maybe it was after the UConn-Iowa game. And everyone was like, oh, she's such a hater. She's putting down other women, this and that. And now, I mean, social media, the algorithm. But now I see everybody all like, oh, look how right Diana Taurasi was. I'm like, shut up. Y'all was saying the opposite.
I know. I hate that.
A month ago. But
I agreed with it instantly. She didn't say anything wrong. When you're in the NBA, it took Wemby a little bit. Like, it took Wemby, like, obviously we saw his first preseason game. It's terrible. And then obviously, like, he grew, and then, the first time he played the Suns, and then 2 weeks later, or like a week later when he played the Suns. It's 2 different guys. He's like, okay, I learned this. This is how I have to do this. Okay, let me go drop 37 on you. And then, like, the Wemby early on, you're like, okay, that's alien talent. But obviously, the physical abilities that, like, he has, or like LeBron has, like some of these highly touted top first overall picks that, like, obviously Caitlin's on that level in the WNBA stature of, like, how highly touted she was. They have such physical attributes of, like, LeBron 6'8", probably 30 at that point, fastest guy in the league, can jump 40. Victor Wembanyama is 7'5" with, like, an 8-foot wingspan and can shoot and dribble. And you're like, what is this? Caitlin's just 6-foot guard, pretty skinny. Pretty small, just plays like Steph, but like has a Steph-like game. But she really plays like Luka more than anybody. I've always thought.
Kayla Clark.
She plays like the way she crosses over and like Steph, but like her ball control, the way she passes, the way she commands things. She plays more. She has the same game similar to Luka and like how her play style is more than Steph. But like the step back three. The step back threes are like look like Steph, the way like the range that she's pulling at. But like when you're talking about the full game, she controls the offense more like Luka than Steph.
I don't know if I agree with that. I didn't see too. I mean, I didn't watch a ton of. By the way, the Iowa women's coach retired. By the way,
yes, I can understand why. That. I mean, she was at least the Bluter was there for a long period of time too. But
it was like almost 30 years or some shit like that.
But I mean, it makes sense. You leave on that high.
The games I saw, it didn't seem like it was a slow pace because like when I think of the Mavericks, when I think of Luka, he's very much like James Harden on the Rockets, where it's slow paced. I'm gonna hit the guys in the corner, and she seemed more like to hit cutters. She seems to attack to the rim more a little bit. She seems more slash and kick. She seems like completely like the Steph Curry, like the female version of Steph to me. She just feels like that's where her game is.
I guess feels it's like more that's ball where control. That the fact of like the way because Steph's obviously doesn't hold the ball a lot, but like she's gonna dribble the ball a lot and she's gonna create in that sense. But I know what you're saying. She does play a faster paced game than Luka.
I would also say early. I would also say early Steph, like before Steve Kerr, he had the ball a lot more. It was more. He was playing more like how Caitlin
she plays like
now.
Davidson. Like Davidson, Steph had the ball more, kind of. I mean, he had a point guard there too, but like early on, because they tried to make him a traditional point guard, and then they obviously were like, "Hey, you can shoot really well." Didn't know.
Granted, I can't. Yeah, right. Granted, I can't. I can't speak to the women's game, but I don't see anybody who really plays like Harden or Luka as far as like they're gonna have the ball the entire time. And then they're going to dish to the corner if anyone helps. What's Shorty's name? Is it Arike?
Arike Ogunbowale?
Yeah, she's female Kyrie. That girl, I've dubbed her my second favorite player behind Marine Johannes, even playing in the WNBA this year. I'm sad about that. She's going to stay in France.
Ogunbowale. If you remember, what? Sorry.
Those are my top two right now. Mourinho,
Yeah.
Hannes, and Enrique. Those are my top two.
I was going to say, Enrique Gumbawale, if you would have saw her, I don't know if you watched the preseason game, Fever versus, God, why am I blanking? The Dallas Wings, sorry. But, like, she had a step back. She had a crossover.
That's what made her. That's what made her become my second.
Oh my God!
I saw it
for
and
the
I'm
win.
like, this girl.
Boy.
This girl looks like Kyrie a little bit. And I looked up the highlights, and people were like, "No, she's like that." I'm like, right,
yeah,
gotta pay a little more attention.
She really is. She's
no,
really
I can't. I can't wait to dive into the women's game more after the NBA playoffs end, and that'll be the hybrid right there. That'll be what links the WNBA into the football season. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
I can't wait for that. I won't watch a ton of baseball this summer. I never do.
Nope.
I do plan on catching a little. Excuse me. I do plan on catching a little bit of Dodgers games and watching Ohtani in the summer, but it'll really just be his at bats. I don't plan on following the Dodgers too much.
Fair.
But so yeah, Ohtani this summer, then the WNBA. And then obviously we'll have some great podcasts cooked up for you. I do want to say this, Keenan. I think we're going to be having Duke and Brandon back on. They're itching to get back on here. We've had a podcast that we've wanted to do since February that just literally has not happened for reasons outside of all four of us. Like it just hasn't happened because the podcast gods did not want it to happen. And I'll preview it right here. Our dream pickup game. 10 players we'd want to see. And there's another list I want to do, and maybe we'll do it on our next episode. And whether that's with just me and you or if that's with Brandon and Duke, we'll see. Top 10 most exciting players we've watched. That's another one I want to do. And maybe there'll be some correlation there with our pickup game. Maybe there won't be. I know my list.
Just basketball or any sport?
Basketball.
Okay, just making sure. Just making sure. But,
that's an interesting one, too. That's a very interesting one. If we did just the 10 most exciting players we've seen from any sport, that's actually a great idea. I'd love to do that, too. So I'd actually love to do both. I would love to do both because just as soon as you said that, I got like 6 different names from like a ton of different sports that just popped in my head.
I even had some Red Sox
That would be a lot of fun.
Randomly, I hit them 04 Red Sox players I hit in my head.
Jason Varitek.
I was like, wait a second. I did love watching Pedro and Kurt Schilling pitch, but that's fun.
Doug Mirabelli, Pedro. Love Pedro. Love Pedro Martinez.
The last thing I wanted to quickly say, though, was we were speaking on the women's game, and obviously women's college basketball, we still got plenty of stars in the hands, and it's going to be in a great place now, even with Caitlin gone. They scheduled a home and home this year. Back to back, I think end of December, early January with UConn USC. So we're gonna see Juju versus Paige.
I think
twice.
I saw something about that.
Yeah, they understand who the two stars
of the college
basketball.
That's not normal in any aspect of college basketball, men or women's, to have a home and home for someone who's not just out of conference, but like completely out of conference. Like on the West Coast,
they don't
have an LA team come to.
The only time they'd play each other would be like in a random Maui tournament, if they
scheduled it, or if they just scheduled it. It'd be one game I could see because you will just have random. Like I remember, when Steph got popping at Davidson, they played against Duke. Like that was a big thing. So I could see one, but a home and home, that's big. That's really interesting, actually. And that'll be
Paige
huge. That's going to do numbers.
Juju,
that's going to do numbers.
They understand. Okay, that's our best player right now. That's probably going to be our best player right now. Put those two together, home and home.
Let me say this.
Love it.
Let me say this. Saturday, I had that Fever Liberty game on, and it was just like on. I wasn't really watching it because I think it got out of hand at the end.
Yeah, I did.
Keenan, there's parts about the WNBA that I absolutely love because it reminds me so much of the old NBA, just because they're such in their infancy. And maybe this is a deeper conversation because, let me get to the point first. All right. So the game ends, right? Close game. Obviously, much like the NBA, like these women know, like the players know each other, right? I'm sure there's people on the Liberty who are friends, people on the Thunder or players on the Thunder. Actually, that first game, it was Fever in Connecticut. That's who played tonight too. I found out DeJounte, right, starting point guard for the
Yep.
Connecticut Sun. She's dating a player on the bench for the Fever, right?
Mhm.
So you might have that, right? Anyway, game ends, Liberty Fever. Liberty take care of business. 0 handshakes across the board
Nope,
from
they
the
just
Liberty
left.
and Fever. They just went to the locker room. I'm like, I fucking love this. Like, where is that in the NBA? You don't get that ever in the NBA. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you get daps from fucking 1 through 12. It seems like whether it's a regular season game, whether it's whatever. The only time we see no handshakes in the NBA is in an NBA playoff series because, obviously you wait till, such and such gets eliminated. But that was so refreshing. I'm like, oh my God, that's the game I grew up on where you might get a handshake or a fist bump there, like if you know the player, but they went their separate ways, didn't even acknowledge, and they weren't looking for it either. Like there was no one on the Thunder or the Liberty looking for a dap, looking
Fever.
for a hug. What's up?
Fever. You said Thunder.
That's the Thunder, yeah. Fever. There was nobody on either team looking for a dap, looking for a hug. So that was refreshing. And I was gonna say, Keenan, this is interesting. I don't know if I brought this up before. Obviously, I've said on here, like I coach a junior high girls team, right? Quick story: my first year of coaching, I had coached Keenan prior and his AAU team. But my first year of like school coaching, I coached both the girls and boys junior high team at that school, right? And my boys team that particular year, that first year, was a team I could have won a lot of games with. And we did. We won quite a bit of games. But their level of focus of wanting to learn the game, and I'm not taking shots at any of these kids here. They're all good kids, and they're all now young men, of course. But, their level of focus, and I would say they wanted to look the part more than they did want to learn the game.
That was
right?
social. That was big social media too. So you have to think that's like ball is life, and like they're kind of wanting to.
I'm gonna continue to that point after, right? So this would have been like I think it would have been 2016.
Yeah.
I think that was my first year, 2015, 2016. It could have been 2014, 2015. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. But I just noticed, like, no matter how, like, the boys had the sneakers, they had all that, but it was a select few that were really listening to what I was preaching, and the other ones really just want to look the part, even some of the better players. And I ended up taking over solely the girls' team, who was not nearly as talented, or we didn't have the players that the guys' team did that first year. Because like they really wanted to win and they really wanted to learn the game, and they were actually like listening to what I was preaching. And we had success later on because of that, in large part because of their dedication, right? I've mentioned this a couple weeks back. This was a couple months ago now. I ran into Evan Slayton. I've actually ran into him a couple times. He's coaching now at the junior high level. I want to get that correct. I think it's a junior high, and if it's not, it's maybe like a freshman team. Whatever. But he says it's incredibly hard to coach the boys, the guys side of things, because, like you said, Keenan, social media. He said nobody wants to get crossed up, so nobody's playing defense. Nobody wants to get dunked on, so they're not, like, he just said it's just complete and utter, like, me ball, first of all. Like, it's all on offense, they want to cross someone up, and on defense, they don't want to get crossed up. Or they just want to jack up threes on offense or this and that. So, and he said, he's not coaching on the girls' side, but he says he sees much more focus and dedication and wanting to learn the game on the women's side. So I don't know how true all this is. I mean, this is just in our area, and this is just, someone we know, obviously, who's coaching. But the fact that he's, to some degree, getting what I was getting 6 years prior, and he said it's getting much worse. Like, by the year, he can see, like, just the progression, specifically on the young men's side of basketball, where it's just completely social media influenced. That's very interesting to me. And there's still very much a social media influence on the women's game, but it seems to be more positive. It's very interesting to me.
It's an for women. It's like uplifting, like the fact that, like, no, you're really good. Like, go, like, you can, like, on the men's side, it's like, oh, like this flashy crossover move. Like TJ McConnell's not going to get a lot of social media buzz in kind of that sense. It's going to be the flashy moves and things like that. But you and I both loved watching TJ McConnell because he's a dog. He plays great.
I think that's what's getting promoted in the women's game too. But like, it just seems like I don't know what it is, but there's a seriousness to women basketball players from the ground
I think
up.
I feel like they think they have to prove themselves every time. Now, like, I was listening to podcast P with Paul George. I was listening to his podcast he was actually talking to Cameron Brink. I was listening to that actually before, while I was watching the Fever game. I was kind of going back and forth with it. And she was talking about how, like, like Tara Vanderveer, one of the greatest college coaches of all time, and she holds the record for most wins.
She played under her, correct?
Yeah, so she was talking about how, like, she would get on everybody. I know she was saying she was kind of trying to keep it, like, on lesser, but she was like, the S in Stanford doesn't stand for stupid. Like, what are you doing? Dumb and Dumber. You were not in that movie. Like, basically, like, talking, like, what are you doing? You are idiots, basically, for what you're doing. And basically just talking about how, like, she would light into them and light into Cameron specifically. And
Coach
Paul George was like, yeah, I don't know if coaches can fully get away with that in the NBA now, because, like,
No, they definitely can't.
No, and that was the thing. He was like, I don't think coaches could get away with that in the NBA now, because it's such a player-centric league that they would butt heads with the players, and if it's going to be between the players and the coach is going to be gone because the players have more impact, especially, like, your higher-end players. So he was talking like that. He's like, no, coaches don't really talk like that. And it was just amazing to me to think, like, a college coach obviously is, like, talking to Cameron Brink, the number 2 overall pick in the draft, would be number 1 in 9 times out of 10, but you had a supernova in Caitlin Clark because she's that good, is getting talked to like Bill Belichick talks to Tom. And you just don't you get that in the NFL, which is why the NFL feels more relatable and, like, almost more, you can gravitate towards it more. It's because, like, it's only player driven. It's
you can make great
driven.
money. You can make great money in the NFL, but you're not going to have guaranteed contracts. Where in the NBA, you can have, I mean, I don't want to call out any names, but let's say if Kyle Korver was playing in today's league, he'd be a $40 million a year player probably in, like, 2 years. That's the thing that's really going to happen is someone like what's Tyler? We don't really got to get into the numbers, but Tyler Hero, I know he just got an extension, 2 years ago? Him and Poole both did. And that's probably like 25 mil a season.
I think it's like 28-ish, 28, 29 mil a year.
I mean, that was once upon a time Kevin Garnett numbers, right? I mean, so, that's the drawback of the NBA is you are going to have like Tatum and Jalen, like, those guys are going to be 70 million a year type of players. Anthony Edwards next contract,
they're
something
together,
like that.
They're going to be $650 million about. And, like, over the totality of their contract.
That's not relatable. And you can't, there's only certain places you can coach right now, and that'd be San Antonio because Pop's still there. Miami. That's why I love and have a ton of respect for them, because they actually get coached there. Like, you actually got an actual team system in place in Miami.
Golden State has. I think
Golden State. Yeah. And, Kerr's not that type of coach, but yeah, he would absolutely have the gravitas to where he can just get on there and not have to worry about his job. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he could light into somebody.
He's got tenure there. Brad Stevens back in the day when he was on the Celtics, same thing. He's a laid back guy, but he would actually be able to coach his guys.
And Mike Malone got that. Like, they would not fire Mike Malone for lighting into somebody.
Nor would Jokic be mad at it, right?
No.
And
absolutely.
And actually, that's a style of that's one thing Kidd's notorious for. Jason Kidd. He's notorious for, like, being a complete asshole to his players. Like, not even just lighting into his players, just like an actual dickhead to his players, which is kind of funny. Like, what was the story? I think when he was coaching the Nets, he, like, bullied. I could get this wrong. I want to say it was when he was coaching the Nets. He bullied Jared Allen because he had an Android and he messed up the group chat. And, like, I don't know if they bought him an iPhone or whatever, but I remember them saying, like, he just bullied the shit out of him for it and would play mind games with Giannis, even though Giannis credits a lot of his success to Jason Kidd. But so, like, Jason Kidd probably gets away with a lot of that in Dallas. So there is a select few coaches. I was actually going to say, as far as the WNBA goes, they're probably going to get, like, a lot better coaching. I'm not saying the coaching's bad in the WNBA right now, but I don't really know anybody outside of Becky Hammon. Like, that's a big name because she came to the NBA first. Obviously, she's a legend in the WNBA as a player, but was a big deal when she went to San Antonio and then got that job for the Aces. And they've got something there too. Like as far as marketing goes, with Becky Hammon as coach and the Aces basically having a super team, that's going to be something they can market as far as like being like the almost like the Yankees or the Patriots of that league. Like they can market it to where like this is you're either for them or against them type team because they have so much talent. So
yeah,
I don't know. The WNBA's got a lot of good things. I know I kind of went all over the place there, but WNBA is in a great space. And yeah, no, that coaching conversation is interesting because there's only a select few that can really do that in the NBA. And that's part of the NBA that I do think is like in a tough spot. It's been a tough spot anyway for the last 10 years, especially, but going forward, it's going to be even tougher for these guys to really coach.
Yes.
Seems like Chris Finch is one of those guys who can coach though too. Seems like he's got the ear of his players.
But you have to have a guy like Anthony Edwards who's willing to take that.
Accept
because
coaching,
because if Anthony Edwards was soft but still really good, Chris Finch could be a guy who would be kicked out because of that. So like shout out to Anthony Edwards for being a guy willing to be able to take that. But it is getting late. The last thing I'm going to say is I'll know the WNBA has officially made it when I hear a Mike Breen bang on a Caitlin Clark 3. I'll know they made it. I love Ryan Ruocco and Rebecca Lobo. They do a very good job. But like if we get Mark Jones and Mike Breen on calls, especially over the summer when there's no more basketball, NBA basketball, if I get a Mike Breen bang on a Caitlin Clark 3,
Mike Breen bang.
The WNBA has officially made it. But Warner Brothas Podcast, that was Kyle, Keenan, YouTube Warner Brothas Podcast, TikTok Warner Brothas Podcast, Instagram Warner Brothas Podcast. Anywhere you want to find us, it's going to be at the Warner Brothas Podcast. Appreciate all of you. Thank you guys for tuning in, of course, and we will catch you guys soon.
Like a man.